Hi guys, in this video I'm going to go over some revision techniques with you. I know quite a lot of you have got mock exams coming up either before Christmas or after Christmas. So I'm going to go through 3 or 4 ways that you can revise more effectively and more efficiently. So number one is looking at past papers. If you go online to Edexcel or AQA or whichever board that you're on and look up past papers, you will see all of the past papers apart from the one from last year, which is the one that your teachers are probably going to use for your mock. So you can't see that one. But the rest of them, you can see the past papers, you can download them, you can look at the questions. Now, looking at past papers is a really good way to revise because basically for lots and lots of the questions and the topics, the examiners can only ask a few things. So for example, if you're looking at tectonics, then the examiners can only really ask you about a volcano or an earthquake and an LEDC or an MEDC. And there's not an awful lot of wording that they can change each year. So if you have a look at what it's been, then the chances are it's going to be the opposite to what it was last year. Although, it might be the same, but there's not much variation. So looking at past questions can give you a really good idea of what's come up, maybe what hasn't come up, and what comes up all the time, because certain things come up all the time. You can also look at the terminology that the examiners use. So looking at command words, that's my second little hint, is that you go through and you make sure that you know what all the command words mean. Now that might seem quite simple, but when I mark exams and past papers and things like that, the amount of times that when a describe question's asked, that students go on to explain and give reasons for things, and that's not what's being asked. So a 2 or 3 mark describe question just need you to say what you see, and an explain question will maybe be for 4 marks, and that needs a little bit more detail. Then you need to make sure you know what words like analyze and evaluate and assess and things like that mean. So it's really worth having a look at all your different command words. Suggest, for example. In the back of your textbooks, you will have a list of command words, and hopefully your teachers may have given you sheets on different command words. So it's really, really good to have a look at your command words and then have a look in the exam and your past papers and look at responding to those command words. What I would also suggest you do is highlight the command words and highlight the questions so you understand kind of exactly what's being asked of you, and annotate around it. Really, that's really good practice, is to annotate around each of the questions so that you know exactly what's being asked. Right, the next really good thing to do in geography anyway is to make flashcards, but I would suggest going through each of your topics, so starting maybe with the climate topic and then moving on to tectonics, etc., and looking at all of the key terms, all of your specific subject terminology, so constructive, destructive, plume, if you're looking at tectonics, etc., convection current, that kind of thing, and going through each of them and defining those key terms, because if you can define those key terms and if you understand what they mean, then you're kind of halfway there to answering half of the whole exam paper, because quite often you'll be asked to recall those key terms, and sometimes you're asked to define them, sometimes they're part of an answer, but by understanding what they mean, you've helped yourself a lot with understanding the topic. So I would definitely say looking at key terms 100%, and do that for each of the topics. Now, I give my students a list of these key terms and they need to define them, but you can do it yourself easily. You may well find them online as well, so that's quite easy to do. The next thing is make mind maps of each of the different topics. Now, you can take an A4 or an A3 sheet of paper and you can do a whole topic on an A3 or an A4 sheet of paper. Making a mind map is a really good way to put together all of the key terms and processes for each of the topics. So it's really worth doing that. Don't spend lots and lots of time drawing pictures and things like that, but do draw a few images and colour code, because in that way your mind has got some hooks to go on, and if your mind's got a hook, it's much easier for your mind to go, your memory to go to that place in the exam and find that bit of information. So if you colour code, for example, tectonics in one colour, you might want to colour code human geography, the world human geography in Malawi and India, that section in a different colour, etc. Draw some little icons that represent each of the key terms or processes or case studies. If you can, that'll help. And maybe put the whole lot on one mind map. So that's a really good way to revise as well. Another way is to use a friend and revise together. Now that's always good as long as you're not going to chat together and waste your time. But getting together with another person is really good. You can test each other on key terms, you can test each other on command words, you can test each other on exam style questions, etc., etc. The other thing that I would do as well is I would maybe go through the textbook or your notes and just write down some general, really quite general questions on what is this, what is that, just knowledge checkers really, and try to do that for each of the topics. Again, I've got that. I go through the textbooks for my students and I type up those questions. I may well post some on my Instagram account if you have a check of there in the next day or two. I'll see if I can post some of those knowledge checkers really for each of the topics, and that's another good way to test yourself of what you know. So there's lots of things that you can be doing, but you need to be actively revising as opposed to passively revising. So just reading through things, it really won't help and it won't make things stay in your long-term memory. So I would always suggest that you actively revise, that you are writing out things, that you are practicing past questions and that kind of thing, that you're not just being too passive. So there's some 3 or 4 ways that I think you can start your revision for your mocks.